Morning, afternoon, evening, wherever you're calling from. People are rolling in. Lots of people attending right now. So we're just give those folks a few seconds to get acclimated and find themselves a coffee or a nice glass of water. While we're waiting for everybody to just get seated, we're going to start some polls, and then we'll be passing this off to Stuart and Adrian to talk about partitions on the IQ2 Plus. So we'll get those polls going right now. So nice. All right, there we go. Did you attend last week's workshop on Live Answer and Live View? Wow, about 50-50. Very good. Well, welcome to those who did not attend last week. We'll give that a few more seconds. And we will close that poll off. Okay. We'll launch our next one. What % of installs are you currently utilizing partitions? Interesting. Here we go. So about 60% are using partitions less than 25% of the time. 10% are never using partitions. And yeah, about 25% using 25 to 50 and just less than 10% on 50 to 75. So it's great. We really appreciate your engagement. So let's close that poll. And we'll go to the next one. So when you're using partitions, what is the most common partition usage? Is it 2, 3, 4, or you're not using partitions? All right. Very significant, 90% using 2 partitions. About, it's dropped now, but 80% using 2, 8% using 4, and 8% not using partitions at all. That's great. Give that one a few more seconds just to finish. All right, we'll close that poll and go 3 more. Nice easy ones. So when you are using partitions, what % is commercial? All right. Pretty even split there. Just about 30% are between 75 to 100% commercial. 33% less than 25% commercial. So a lot of people using partitions in residential there. That's very good information to have. Give that one a few seconds to close. All right. 2 more, nice and easy. Would you like the ability for Z-Wave to be assignable to secondary partitions? So, we're asking some of these questions because we are starting the planning for the next firmware release, 2.7. So we're interested to see what people, some features people like to get added in there. So, and for those who are wondering, 2.6 is dropping on Monday, and that's going to add Neo keypad support, plus a whole bunch of new features, but it'll add Neo keypad support to the wired to wireless module. So 100% would like to see Z-Wave assignable to secondary partitions. All right, we definitely hear you loud and clear. All right, 1 more. I'm pretty sure this one's going to be 100% as well. So let's go see what happens. Would you like the option to disable the lock screen when using partitions? As suspected. Yeah, so 100%. Yep. 70% of you have voted. 100% would like to do the option to disable the lock screen when using partitions. So we ironically did have a conversation this morning as we're starting the discussions for 2.7, and this was definitely on the agenda for conversation. All right, so I'm going to close these polls, and then we're going to pass this off to Adrian and Stuart. So I'm going to close this. There you go, gentlemen. There you go. You're live.
Thanks so much, Neil. Thanks to all of you guys for coming in today, all of you for hanging out with us, and we're going to cover some of the new features for, well, not even new anymore, but the new features of the IQ Panel 2 that were added with firmware 2.3.0 for adding partitions. And I'm Adrian Apong. I'm the technical account manager up in Ontario, Canada. Stuart, why don't you introduce yourself?
Hi, Stuart Brinsfield. I cover Virginia, North Carolina, South Carolina, and Georgia.
Excellent. Okay, well, here we go. So with version 2.3 and higher, and we're currently at 2.55 and about to release 2.6, all of the panels now have the ability to have up to 4 partitions. And with those 4 partitions, we can assign a variety of our sensors and devices to it. So like it says on the screen here, security and life safety sensors, the IQ remotes, those are the Wi-Fi secondary keypads. We can assign the Power G secondary keypads to any of the partitions, as well as our Power G sirens, and of course user codes to be able to operate those partitions. Stuart, you want to give them some any more info on that?
Well, it's just with the ability to do the partitions, you want to be able to have that flexibility to your sensors. Your keypads have keypads assigned to different partitions. Obviously, we have the ability to do 3 of the IQ remote keypads, which that gives you, with the main panel, it gives you 4 total, so you can have 1 per partition. Plus, you have the Power G options, which we can do up to 5 of those. So you have a lot of options to be able to do this partitioning and have everybody have the access that they need.
Excellent. Okay, so we're just showing you enabling the partitions here, and you would go to advanced settings, put in your dealer code, which you have to do the first time because partitions that haven't been enabled yet. Then installation, dealer settings, and partitions, and you set the partitions to be currently enabled by clicking on the little check mark on the right side there as circled on the screen.
And when this happens, I mean, you're doing the partition adding, all partitions are accessible at that time. Of course, just like other systems, you cannot disable partition 1, so you don't have to worry about getting rid of that one.
Right, so I was going to show you that on this screen, but I think I already showed it there under dealer settings. All right. Right in the middle there, partitions are currently enabled. Now, the next thing you're going to want to do is assign some zones to that partition, because until you put a zone on a partition, the partition doesn't show up anywhere else. So we want to go to advanced settings, installation, devices, security sensors, and then you can either do an auto learner add if you're putting in a new sensor, or edit sensor if you have an existing sensor that you just want to assign to a partition.
Right. If you choose to, I mean, you can do that by zone, do your partitioning selection by zone, or if you choose to, learn all your devices in and then go and edit and select the partition at that point. So either way, it's easier for you. You can do it both ways. So what Adrian's showing you here is, once you go into the sensor assigning the zones, as soon as you go to the sensor that you're trying to program, all you do is select partition name. It goes to the drop down, you select the partition, and that's all you have to do to put it on whatever partition that you want it on.
That's right. Just hit save and you're done. Okay. For naming the partitions, we can name the partitions, and that's gonna, help to keep things clear, and also for your end user, of course, being able to tell what the partitions are by name instead of, just by partition 1, partition 2. So we go to advanced settings, partitions, we select the partition name. You can put in a custom description, so you can type in what you like. And when you go in the installation screen, you'll see like this here.
It's always a good idea to name your partition, so that whether you're adding sensors at a later point or just doing your setup, it gives you a better visual of what partition you're putting your particular zones into.
I'll put this one, I think I had it set as tool shed. And save, and it shows up as tool shed there.
Now you also look at, actually go back to that real quick, Adrian. I'm sorry. When you're doing your partitions, you'll notice you have an info circle there and then an edit screen. So on both of these, you can edit which zones are actually in your partition, but the info screen will actually give you everything that is on that particular partition, whether it's an IQ remote, a Power G, or any sensors that are on it. So it gives you a quick view of actually what's on each partition.
Hey guys, this is a question here in the background. Someone asked, are these labels, partition labels, viewable in alarm.com?
Yes, they are. Yes.
Any other questions, Joel?
Nope. That's it. Doing a great job, guys.
All righty. Okay, we have the ability to assign sirens so that they can sound off on partitions as well. For that, we go into advanced settings, installation devices, to security sensors, and then we add them almost like you would add, or the same way as you would add a security sensor to the system.
And the nice thing about this, I mean, probably one of the biggest issues with partitioning is being able to have that noise just in that partition that you actually want it to be in, especially if it's, say, a duplex or two areas where you don't necessarily want that sound all over the place. So it gives you that the ability to assign, each siren to the partition that it's supposed to be.
Successfully.
All right, we have other options for the sirens as well, where you can control if the siren is going to just be for that one partition, whether it's going to sound for all partitions, and some, details of which sound will sound globally for all partitions or just for the partition.
So yeah, so as you can see, the global fire siren is enabled by default because fire is a little bit different, and you might want to notify that other partition that there's actually a fire alarm in the building.
So here are the options here. You can see global fire siren is on by default. All the other ones are off, but you can set them quite easily just by checking off if you want them to sound everywhere or not.
Earlier in the poll, a lot of guys are doing this commercially. Usually residentially, you probably would have all those checked. On a commercial, it's nice to have the ability to separate that stuff.
Okay, so of course we want to be able to assign users once you have your partitions set up. For the user management, it's fairly easy. We go to advanced settings and straight to user management. You can add users there, but you can also edit any of the users and change the partitions that they have access to. So that looks like this here. We have some users already set up. If I was to say housekeeper, you get access to the garage. You can even clean up the tool shed if you want to. And that's it right there.
And as you can see, everything, after it's in there, you can edit anything you need to. If the housekeeper, doesn't need access to a certain partition, you can kind of take that one off so that they don't have it, or whatever might be the situation. Maybe somebody needs a little more access. So you can always go in and edit any of these different settings just by going into the user assignments.
Okay, we can also assign our remotes and keypads to the partitions that we want them on, right? So that you can have a secondary touchscreen keypad, say, in the garage, in whatever other room you might be using, and change the partition as you see fit.
Right. As we mentioned earlier, you can have 3 of the IQ remotes, so that gives you a total of 4 touch screens. So you can actually assign, if you have all 4 partitions activated, you can assign, the IQ remotes to, separate partitions so that everybody has access to their part of the system.
So we go to IQ remote devices here. I have a pin pad. I already named the garage pin pad, so we should probably move it over from the main house to the garage. Hit save.
Sensor updated successfully.
That's all there is to it.
Gentlemen, a little question from the audience now that you're speaking on partitions. Can the arming stations be set up for multiple partitions or just the partition that they're assigned to?
Right now, just the partition they're assigned to.
Yeah, on the on any of the arming stations in the IQ remotes right now, you assign it to a partition, but on those particular keypads, you will not be able to switch between partitions once they're assigned from an end user standpoint. You could always go in and reassign something as a dealer to another partition, so it would now live on that partition, but there's no switching back and forth. However, you can switch back and forth on the main panel. You will see an interface there, which I'll show you near the end of this. Okay, assigning Power G keypads to the system on for a partition, pretty much the same as we did for the sensors and for the siren. Under installation, devices, security sensors, you're going to learn or edit what's existing already. So this one's already assigned to the garage, but I could assign it to any partition that was existing.
Right. Yeah, just like the others, if you want to change it, you can. But as you learn it in, just pick the partition you want it to be on, and then hit save, and you're ready to go. So remember, you can have up to 5 of the Power G keypads in addition to the 3 IQ remotes.
Okay. Some important things to know about when you're doing partitions, because the questions, you'll eventually come up with them, I'm sure. When you enable the partitions, it automatically, at least at our current firmware, automatically brings up the lock screen. So you don't have the option to turn it off, or you don't have a lock screen. And this was mostly, the thought was to prevent, you know, someone who has access to partition 2 but not partition 1 from seeing the status of the other partition at all. And in commercial settings or in a multi-dwelling type of setting, this will work, you know, really well, makes sense. But we are looking at changing that feature just for times when people have, you know, partitions in their own house and they don't need to worry about having someone access or see the status of a partition that they don't usually have access to. So we're looking at that. When you enable the partitions, it automatically also disables some of the other screens, like the scenes page, where you can, you know, have a little icon where you can bring up a scene that you've pre-programmed through alarm.com, that kind of thing. It won't show up anymore. Neither will the home control page or the check-in, check-out. If you're using the wellness feature, if you have multiple partitions, it's not going to have the check-in and check-out feature. Besides that, they pretty much stay the same. Stuart, you want to talk about any of the other points there?
Yeah, well, you know, like, you know, one of the biggest concerns whenever you do partitioning, what happens if that partition gets disabled or something happens, you know, somebody goes in and turns off partition 2. Well, in the IQ2, what happens is if everything, no matter if you have 4 partitions, 3 partitions, if they are disabled, everything reverts to partition 1. So one thing you don't lose is you never lose that security on the system. So you don't have to fear that's going to happen. Okay, so now Z-Wave is always going to be on partition 1, at least right now with the poll questions. But when it comes to security devices, it'll always revert to partition 1 if it has nowhere else to go. Okay, as far as, like we talked about, the remote keypads, they only support 1 partition, and right now zones cannot be assigned to more than 1 partition, so there's no common zones on the system. So 1 partition per zone. Per zone.
You have any questions on any of that stuff coming in?
Hey guys, Joel here. We actually had a question posed earlier that I thought was maybe a little poignant to the subject. And one of the guys asked, why would we want to have additional partitions in a residential application? And so one of the examples that I gave, especially with Power G, we obviously have way more range now. Is, you know, we have that outdoor gate sensor, and I actually have my outdoor gate on a second partition, so I can arm my backyard and know who's coming and going, completely separate from my home.
Well, and also, Joe, with your area, you know, all those people with pools and detached garages, it's also a great way to keep those areas you may not access every day, and keep those armed while you're walking in and out of the house. You can have those areas, you know, armed, and have the ability to turn them on and off, you know, independently. So just keeps you apprised to that. You know, somebody leaves a garage door open or you know, comes in there and you don't know, you're definitely going to want to have that ability to keep those on even when your house is off.
Also, many places up here, we have people with basement apartments, and they have somebody else living in the basement apartment. Well, they can have their own keypad, their own partition. You know, they'll share some of the spaces, maybe from the entrance going out, but besides that, they can arm and disarm for themselves. Okay, Joel, guys, let me know if there's any more questions. If not, what I'll do is just show the interface what it looks like once you have partitions enabled. So if we put in our code.
A couple more. One is all 4 partitions supported through alarm.com?
It is. Yes.
And there's no additional programming that needs to be done in alarm.com for all of them to show up.
No, they show up, they'll read it from the panel, but also you can actually program devices in remotely for the partitions through alarm.com as well. So you could, from alarm.com, reassign a partition for a zone if you needed to. Okay, so as I said, interrupt me if there's more questions, because I know it's already 2:23 by the clock here, but I just wanted to show that when you have the partitions enabled, you get dots here for each partition, and it will actually change the color of the dots based on the status of the system, if a partition is armed or not. And in order to navigate between the partitions, all you do is you swipe up and down, and you'll swipe up to the next partition. So we have the garage here, the tool shed here, and just so you can see what it looks like.
Select arm system type.
I'll arm one of these up.
Yeah, Adrian, that's kind of one of the nice things is once you have a partition armed on the side, that little dot changes colors to give you a status. So if you know you're yellow or red, you know that you've got a partition armed without even having to swipe. So you can kind of see right now that the partitions are armed just by looking at the little dots.
Maybe I'll leave the armed away one off, as it's 60 seconds away on that still. But yeah, you can see how the middle dot there is green because partition number 2, or sorry, yellow because partition number 2 is armed. And so the navigation between the partitions is super simple. And if you guys have used other systems with partitioning, and you know, sometimes it can be a little complicated to explain to the user and for them to keep it straight, but I think this one works really well.
Right. And plus, of course, you have to have a code that gives you access to all the partitions, or you'll just get a failure to disarm or an invalid code message if you try to disarm the wrong partition.
That's correct.
Hey guys, one other question in regards to the remote capabilities for the partitions is, can different users through the app be assigned to different partitions?
Well, that would pertain to their user code. So if their user code only has access to those partitions, that's all they'd have through the alarm.com.
Awesome.
Well, all right, folks. I want to say a big thank you to everyone for coming out today and for hanging out with us for, you know, short half hour here. Went by really quickly. And I'd like to thank all these guys on the JCI side who are in here and helping out with all the questions in the background, and Neil for running this with the polls and all of that. Stuart, anything you'd like to say before we turn it over to Neil so he can You can wrap
Yeah,
it.
I mean, hopefully we've shown you guys today how easy it is to do partitioning, and with the different questions, how important sometimes it can be to give the system its full ability. I mean, part of the biggest thing is, we're in the house all the time, especially with COVID. We're in the house. The security systems aren't being armed as much where we're at. So if we have areas like that detached garage, somewhere where we may not be, being able to keep those on and secured is huge with today, because and obviously you should have your system on in your house when you're there during the day also, but we all know a lot of people don't do that. But at least the areas that you're not accessing, to be able to do that, and just programming, overall programming, just showing how the IQ2 makes it very simple to not only partition but to manage it after you've done it, whether it's a user code or an adding a device, whether it's a siren or a keypad or whatever. Within a few minutes, you can have a partition system and have it working exactly like the customer needs it to be. So, but again, thank you guys for coming out today. We appreciate it. Appreciate your, you guys are busy. So we appreciate your time, and I won't take away Neil's thunder. I'll let him finish up on that stuff, but we appreciate it. And we're always available if you need any help or project design or questions. Feel free to reach out to any of us if you have any questions. But thank you very much.
Thanks, guys. Great job. So yeah, we will just ask that you please remember to complete the after workshop survey. We have 2 more sessions in, we'll call it season 1 of our workshop series. So next week would be advanced programming options on Power Series Pro. And then we have 1 more on the last Thursday of April on the Power GPIR cams. And then we are going to take a well-deserved break for a few days, a few weeks. Probably a few days would not be good, but a few weeks. And then we'll be coming back with season 2. So again, please remember to complete that survey. It's giving us a lot of great information on what we can do for season 2 of this workshop series. So appreciate everybody's time. We finished on time. Again, great job, guys. Thanks, everybody. Enjoy the rest of your day and stay safe.
Thank you, everybody.
Thanks, guys.